Some days I'm a really good employee. Some days I'm a great wife. Some days I'm a great mom. And sometimes I just suck at everything because everything's a hot mess.
I have spent so many of my last 20 years learning how to problem solve. At this phase in life, what I've been trying to actually unlearn is how to problem solve.
For the longest time, I was trying to be as efficient as I could myself, but it was all me doing everything. Now I've created this issue where I'm doing all these things myself when I have all these people that can help me. If you don't delegate beyond yourself, you'll never scale beyond yourself.
My unlearn is letting go of my expectations of others, letting go of how I think someone should show up and let them show up how they're going to show up and react accordingly.
Welcome to the Triple, where 3 C-suite women with 3 kids each give you a triple shot of unfiltered truth.
Okay, so most people start their refresh at the beginning of the year. January 1, you turn the page, you're ready to engage. For me, as a parent, I feel like September is my restart. I'm finally sending the kids back to school. We have a routine. Everyone's getting up on time, sort of. And we're getting out the door, and that refreshes me to say, how am I engaging in work? And I'm interested if you guys are January 1 restart people, or is like the idea of getting rid of your children and ending the summer your version of an engaged restart?
So I feel like this is a fascinating check-in. I love this question. I've never thought about this, to be perfectly honest. You're so smart. And no, I don't feel like this is any sort of a restart. I feel like this is a complete cluster because the summer has been messy, and then I feel like we're putting our kids back in structure, which is really nice, but also there's so much going on between now and the end of the year, including holidays and including everything, that I just feel like it's so messy that it's hard to feel like a true restart. Whereas like in January, we've been in school, we've had some structure, and then we're now like routinized, right? And so really then you can kick up that like first part of the year, but maybe, yeah, I don't know. This is a really interesting question. I don't know.
But maybe you don't feel like there is ever a restart in this part of life. Like,
which is completely 100% true.
yeah.
Well, it's just an infinite loop of like chaos. But so my kids are a little bit younger. I'm in kindergarten and first, so I haven't had as many school starts as you guys have.
Don't forget your 1-year-old.
Yeah, I have. Well, yeah. And that's just
Remember
there. But so I've never thought of it until you said this too. I think I do. I think I'm the September restart, but not in a, I take my January restarts as like, I'm going to get back on a diet. I'm going to do this differently, and it's going to be really hard. In school, starting school is hard for me.
Yeah.
It's some people are like, oh, your kids are back at school. Yay. My morning is chaotic with the East Coast, West Coast combination and the kids running around. And I still, it's probably my fault, I still dress my kids primarily. I'm still helping them with their clothes.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm like, oh, wake up, get up. I'm like, wake up, step into this, do this. Here's your breakfast. And it's terrible in the mornings.
Yeah.
And so, but it's like I just got onto this really hard workout, or I just started this really hard diet plan, and now I got to do it every single day. And it'll get easier over time. So I do think it's like a restart in that way for me. More than
some
January.
of it, I hear that. I think some of it for me is like a little bit of release of guilt. So in the summer, if they're home and not in a camp week and they're just hanging out, they're calling me constantly. Like, why are you at work and I'm at home and I want to play and hang out? And then when they go to school, there isn't that as much. Like we get into a routine and I feel less guilt because they have to be somewhere else and I don't need to be at home either. So maybe it clears some of my like unconscious headspace when they go back to school, that I have less guilt during that time.
Like less guilt, like when I almost cried to you about how my kids are using their iPads nonstop and what do I do? And basically just go back to school.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that way too.
Right.
And in addition to the toughness of the morning. So
Right.
That is 100% true for me.
No, and it is true because as we both know, Sid gets going early on the East Coast. And so we wake up to a lot of slacks in the morning. So our day starts at 5:30 and you're already in the work piece and trying to navigate that and get your kids dressed and have lunch boxes and not have meltdowns. It makes the mornings a little tricky. But I still see like September for me as like that cleaner start like to the year. But I'm similar to you in that the January is more about like my own internal goals rather than like a clean slate to re-engage at work.
Okay, next segment is life. And the topic today is, what have you unlearned recently? And so I was thinking about this a lot, and I feel like I specifically have spent so many of my last, let's say, 20 years in the workplace learning how to problem solve. Like that is the muscle that I have worked so hard. And at this phase in life, what I've been trying to actually unlearn is how to problem solve, because there are so many situations now where people aren't looking for a problem solve for me. They're looking for me to help them problem solve or for me just to listen. And instead of being so reactive, like all the time, my kids say to me, like, just listen, mom, don't, like, that's not the solution I want. Or, they don't even want a solution. They just want me to listen. And so recently, I've really been trying to, at work and then personally, try to unlearn that quick problem solving nature that I feel like we've spent so much time trying to build.
How do you think you became aware that this is what you were doing and you wanted to change that behavior?
I think it's been a lot of kid related, but also it's interesting. I'm in YPO and we have a forum, and one of the forum rules is basically that you're not allowed to problem solve. You are allowed to listen, and you are allowed to offer your opinions and your life experiences. But problem solving is not something that is allowed in forum. And I think that it just really highlighted it for me. I had already started doing it with the girls and really just trying to listen and ask them how they would like me to help them, right? Which is the new form of problem solving, I think, for moms with younger kids. But I think it just highlighted for me how much I've just done it on autopilot for so long.
What's interesting for me is that my kids are just a couple years younger, but also boys. They don't want me to listen because they don't talk much. They want me to do. They go do this, go do that. Yeah. And they don't really want my comments around it. They just want me to do it. But I think as they get older, though, I just said that I also help them get changed. Like they need to change themselves, right? Yeah. So I'll have to engage that a little bit more, parent-wise.
I think my unlearn is letting go of my expectations of others and letting them, it's kind of like what I talked to you about last night, like letting go of how I think someone should show up and let them show up how they're going to show up and react accordingly. And rather than trying to control that. And that's a whole host of therapy and lots of years to get there. But I think I see that it started for me like with a relationship with my mother and trying to figure all of that out. And then when I see it at work too, it's like certain behaviors, it's like, I do need you to adjust in order to function appropriately in this role. But then there's other things where it's like, I have a constant need to edit. Barrett, my husband, always says that he's in a constant state of improvement based on my constant feedback. And so I'm working on saying like, not everybody has to adjust into my mold because it's not the right or wrong. It's just how I expect that person to show up. And so unlearning that control has been a big thing I've worked on. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting there. But that's what I've been working.
But I agree with you. I'm not there on mine. I've been working on it for years and years, so it's not a new thing either. But for the longest time, I was trying to be I'm still trying to be the most efficient being as I can, right? But it was all me doing everything. So I was trying to be as efficient as I could myself and doing everything myself. And then now I've created this issue where I'm doing all these things myself when I have all these people that can help me and I need to rely on them and they help me so much. And Josh had that quote is, if you don't delegate beyond yourself, you'll never scale beyond yourself. And we want to do more. So I have to now delegate and then allow that person to do it. And it could be anything. It could be my kids getting changed, which I keep saying, or at work, allowing somebody else to do the task. It's a little bit of the problem solving, I think, because I then have this problem for them to solve, right? Or it might just be go through this checklist yourself versus me going through it. So I'm constantly trying to unlearn that and not be the person doing everything.
There was this thing a coach told me once, like the send it back rule, and I struggled with this a lot. But let's say I assign someone something on the team. I'm like, hey, I need you to put this report together. And then they turn it back in and it's 60% of the way there. And so then I edit and I send back comments. and then they get it 90% of what I want, and then they send it back. And then I just usually finish the 90 to the 10. I'm like, I need to get it to where I need to get to. And he was saying, like, you're never allowing that person to have the win and see what a completed task looks like. So send it back. And you keep forcing the send back in that delegation process so that they know what done looks like for you. And that was a really hard thing for me when I started delegating, right? To your point, like, okay, can you delegate? You're probably still holding on to the 10%. Be like, forget it.
I'm at the 60.
Right, exactly.
But you gotta
right, but letting
go
go of
great
that.
accomplishment is just getting it out to get it back. That's my first step.
Use that send it back concept and be like, no, I'm going to keep sending it back. But you also have to build in a buffer to make sure you have enough time to send it back.
Well, I like to use the fishing analogy. You don't fish for them, you teach them how to fish,
Right.
you know? So, I mean, I used it yesterday with you guys too.
Yeah. You got real into that. Fly fishing, regular fishing.
I know.
like-
We didn't understand anything you were talking about.
It was good though.
You never did. This segment is housing, and we're talking about the future of housing. So I do not know how anyone affords anything these days, especially around housing and daycare. We're going to talk about housing, but I think those two combinations, I just don't know how people do it, especially then having all these flashy things and buying all. How do you even afford the roof over your head, right? And I think all I see is costs going up. Rates are going up, the mortgages are going up, the cost of the home is going up, and then rent is going up. Nothing's going down. Like, what is this future? What does it look like? I would love to go back to a generational housing type thing where the grandparents live with the family and they help with the daycare and everyone shares one common rent or mortgage, and then as they get older, the family helps that. But that's not gonna happen. I think people like their space. So I think there's a lot of stuff to be said about microhousing, tiny homes, co-living. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on all of those subjects and what you see.
So I think we as moms talk a lot about childcare, right? It is front and center in our lives, especially until our kids are old enough. And then it's after school care, right? Like what can we do with our kids after school? I think that this is something that is going to continue to be an issue. I think what we have seen a little bit is saying, okay, let's see if we can make this more accessible. For example, in our apartment complexes, by creating opportunities for someone in that complex to like lead a daycare. And so it's kind of like that generational housing concept, but in an apartment complex where there's one person who can say, okay, like I can be the daycare for this age group. Then maybe someone else who could be the daycare for this age group. And like, can we create kind of that structure within an affordable housing complex to provide daycare and provide like wages for that person and therefore for them to live there. So that's one concept we've looked at, which is sort of interesting, but takes a lot of work, right, within each complex to try to make it happen. But from a housing perspective, I think that what we need to see is that affordable housing has this negative connotation. We've talked about this, we've seen this, but that needs to get broken. And I think we're trying to be on the forefront of that. For example, we're building a micro studio complex in NorCal, and that is going to serve a different demo than it has historically served. And it is going to be cool, and it's going to look like it's market rate, but it's going to serve a young professional demo that would otherwise be priced out of that market. How do we create these opportunities for the general population? How do we give them access and show them where to look for affordable housing without, that negative connotation that surrounds it? And so I think that's where we're going. At least that's where I hope we're going is kind of housing for all, affordable or otherwise.
What I think that the micro unit idea too, I think what's helping is income averaging, right? Because what income averaging is it's not the standard affordability. You have to have an average for what is standard. So it goes a little bit higher and it is starting to hit the working class, like the workforce housing more. And so you can capture them in, but also adding the ability to have some be furnished with some Murphy beds or something so that the space isn't so tight.
Yep.
And then still having amenity space so that they can leave their apartment too. Because you don't want everyone just sitting in this small little, apartment, that you want them to have the ability to go work and sit out in the lounge or something like that.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's like two things I'm thinking about. One, and I think we need to name the bureaucracy of building, right? And especially in certain communities, cities want to have affordable housing. They want to create environments where their community can live close to where they work. But a lot of cities, not all, but a lot of cities are creating so much red tape that it gets really hard for developers to come in, especially those like us that are mission-based developers really trying to provide the affordable housing market more units and saying, okay, we have to have better public-private partnerships in order to move the needle in a really meaningful way. And so that's one thing that I think we're going to continue wrestling with and continuing engaging in and trying to create language and laws around this and policies around this so that we can move that needle forward faster. And then the second piece for me is a lot about gentrification. So conceptually, I think gentrification is great. It revitalizes communities and there's a lot of really positive things about it. And also it can push people out of the communities that they live in. So there's a joke, one of Barrett's old board members, Barrett serves on the nonprofit that helps with housing individuals experiencing homelessness. And he was talking to a board member who lived in a neighborhood in East LA and he'd been there a really long time. And he was like, yeah, we always joke when there's a white mom with a stroller, the neighborhood's going to shit. And it's like this joke about it, but it's also like they've completely changed this neighborhood. And so the communities that were creating generational wealth there in the homes that they had purchased and grandparents had purchased were being pushed out by this gentrification. And now there's a $7 donut and a $20 matcha and everyone's like, what the hell happened? And I think we have to think about our role, not just as developers, but as members of the community on what does healthy gentrification look like? How do we keep people in those homes and houses and provide schools, daycares, and programs that meet the needs of that community, but in a healthier, safer way if that community needs that? So I kind of feel like those are the things that are coming up for me. I don't have solutions for either of these at the moment, but those are the things that feel like they're top of mind for me on this.
Yeah, I think something that's really interesting is once you lose the housing, right, and the affordability, it's almost impossible to put it back. And you get things like, for example, you see in LA, you're seeing in Miami now, where it's like to put a unit back in what is now essentially a completely gentrified market rate community is so expensive,
right?
And it makes it almost impossible to finance. So the goal is to keep it, right? Because what I say to people is, you want someone to make your Starbucks coffee? Well, they need to live near their Starbucks, right? No one's driving an hour to work at a Starbucks. It's just not happening. So if you want the community to thrive, then you need a whole host of people to help it do that. And so how do we keep the housing before we lose it? Because once we've lost it, there's almost no shot in getting it back.
Well, and I don't know about you, but I have a lot of friends that have left Southern California purely based on housing affordability and have left and gone somewhere else where they can afford a home with a yard, they can walk to school, they can bike to the local grocery store, and they have that community. And it's really sad because we're also losing talent. We're losing, here, my kids go to public school in LA, and they have had a 44% decline in enrollment in LAUSD over the last 20 years. And 20-something% in the last 5, because people are leaving the community because they can't send their kids to the local public school that they want and afford a house in that neighborhood. And so I think, to your point, it's a lot about daycares and childcare, but it's also about, is there a public school that is the school I want my child to go to? And then I watch in our community where some families are driving 45 minutes to get to the school they want because they can't afford to be in the community. And that doesn't work for me either. I believe deeply in public education and that partnership between healthy, thriving communities where people can live, work, send their kids to school, and do all of the things in that community. Back to your old generational theme, it's we all still used to just walk everywhere. And that would be really nice.
my brother's one of those people, Northern California, but
Right.
moved to Arizona, loves his life there, right?
Yeah.
And he has a great job. It's not that, he was struggling, he was unemployed or anything like that. He has a great job, but he now has a house that he can live in with his children, that space, all of that.
Right.
But one of the comments too about being down in enrollment, now, that's a drastic drop, but also every year less people are having kids because they can't afford them.
Correct.
And it's just really hard to work and have kids and figuring that out. And people are understanding their options and society pressures are changing, but just not being affordable means less people will also have families or have as many kids.
I think that's a really good point, though. I think we're seeing that in a lot of communities. I have lots of female friends that are like, I can't take on that cost of doing it, nor does my workplace allow for maternity leave and create an environment where I can have flexibility. And thankfully, as female leaders at our organization, there's a lot of that and a lot of understanding and flexibility, but many organizations aren't. And I also think our kids don't really understand what it's like because we are so available despite how unavailable we seem sometimes, Yeah. But I agree with you on that a lot. It's hard. It's a problem I think we're going to be trying to solve for a long time.
This segment is in the news. And the topic is about Emma Grade. Emma Grade is a co-founder of Good American and Skibbs, and she recently faced criticism and debate for her comments around work-life balance. She stated that work-life balance is primarily an individual's responsibility, not an employer's, and even considers questioning about it in a job interview as a red flag. These remarks have sparked controversy, with some criticizing her perspective as insensitive to the challenges faced by many employees, particularly women, in balancing work and personal life. Others defend her stance, arguing that she emphasizes the need for individuals to manage their own time and boundaries rather than expecting employers to provide a perfectly balanced environment. So I did a little deep dive on Emma Grade after Tiff brought this to us, and I love her. I'm obsessed. I follow her on all social media accounts. She has a podcast. I'm following that as well. I've listened to a few. I'm obsessed. So I watched the entire podcast, and it wasn't only about this. It was about other things as well, but I think that her comments, the sound bites hit people differently. And I also think every audience is going to hear pieces of it a little bit differently. My overall takeaway is listen to everything she says. And while I don't agree with 100% of her comments, I agree with most of them, which might not be a fan favorite right now. I'd say the biggest one that I didn't agree with, though, is the employer responsibility. It is an employee's responsibility to manage their life. I agree with that. But there is, I believe, the responsibility for somebody in power to not take advantage of somebody. Yeah. And I think that might have been what resonated with people. I also, now that I know her so well, think that she would agree with me on that. And that just wasn't what she was trying to say. But anyways, we're not best friends unless she wants to call me. But so I think that's my biggest thing. There have been situations, I've been in situations where I'm efficient, I'm doing a lot of things, and my employer will then give me more to do and not reward me for that, not compensate me for that, while somebody else can skate away, and I'm actually giving their work to do it. That, I think, is the employer responsibility to not do. I do also think it's the employer responsibility to understand who they're managing. Mm-hmm. And if they're struggling, is it a moment in time? Are they trying to grow, or are they just not able to do the work? And that is what is creating this imbalance for them. I don't quite believe that there should be a work-life balance. It is never in balance. But if somebody's struggling, it could be that they're not right for the job. And I think the employer should be able to identify that. But I'm curious your guys' thoughts as well.
You guys know this is like a hot topic for me. So I'm intrigued by her statement about whose role it is. Because I also, while I am a huge advocate of what I call work-life harmony, when you're going to be like ups and downs, and I've talked about this before, some days I'm a really good employee, some days I'm a great wife, some days I'm a great mom, and sometimes I just suck at everything because everything's a hot mess. So I lean into certain aspects of my life harder when that is required of me. But I do believe in that harmony, and I do think it's important that people have capacity and space and time to live their lives fully outside of their role at work. And I really believe as a leader that the employee has to advocate for that. It is not my job to create your career path and create your workday structure. It is your job to come to me and say, this is what I need. Does this work for you? And then work in partnership to come up with a solution that works best for both. Now, if someone comes to me and says, I only am going to work 3 days, but I need full day pay and I'm efficient, well, that's probably not going to work, right? And I think that as the leader, you have the power to make that choice. I think when you lack empathy and understanding, which I don't think any of us do, but when you lack that, then it shows up differently. When you're just like, no, we're 5 days a week, 8 to 5, figure it the F out. Like, we're never going to be those kind of leaders. And I don't think that's appropriate either. But I do think the onus is a bit on the employee to advocate for what they need and decide alongside their leader if that's a reasonable structure.
So then what were your thoughts on her red flag comment to ask about in an interview? It's hard.
It's hard because I feel both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as someone, again, who advocates hard for this, if that was a primary question in an interview, it would give me pause. But I also know when I look at the two of you that you show up for your kids and you do drop-offs and you go to soccer games and you do the things, but you're also kicking ass and getting all your other shit done. So who am I to say that this person isn't capable of doing that? And maybe they don't have the additional financial resources to hire additional help, so they have less flexibility, but they always get it done. And so my other thing, like I've always managed sales people that in my old life. And my sort of rule, actually learned from Barrett's boss many years ago, was you had a plan number. So you had a goal, and that was what you had to accomplish in the year. And so if you were above goal, I, as the leader, work for you. I will block and tackle. I will take down brick walls. I will support you. I will be flexible with you. Whatever you need, I will be your backstop as your leader because you're doing what I ask and what is expected of you. But if you're below plan and you're not meeting those expectations, you work for me and I will micromanage you. I will have less flexibility. I will have less structure if that is how you operate on the whole. But to your point, there are times where people have shit going on that is going to affect their work, and we need to create empathy for that. But it's more like if you're a person that just shows up generally like that, I have less understanding.
So I think kudos to her for just saying these things out loud, right? Like, and starting these conversations. So I think that's great, right? Because I do think these are really hard topics. I think that it is really on the person, because I think that if you have the right person and the right culture, like we have a really strong culture, and that culture is support, but also get your shit done. Right. And I think it's on that person to come to an interview and say, hey, here's my situation, and I'm going to work late and I'm going to get up early, but I need to pick my kid up at this time and I need to be like home at this time every day. This is what I need to be successful, but I will work, my butt off and I will get everything done. That's a different question than, do you have work-life balance? Like, I think it's really also up to the person on where they want to grow and where they want to grow, right?
Right.
Because if they are going to work a 9 to 5 or they're going to work an 8 to 4 or whatever, then they might be limited in where they end up going, and they might be completely fine with that. So I don't necessarily think it's a red flag to ask the question. I think it's a red flag how you ask the question, right? And what your expectation is of the answer. And I think that if that's something that's really important to you, you better have done your research and know who you're coming into from like a company and a culture perspective.
There was a woman I was mentoring at my old company, and she, after the birth of her first child, went to essentially 60% time. So she worked 3 days in the office. 4th day, she was available but not really working, and the 5th day she had off. And then as her child got older, she was like, I really want to take on this leadership role within the organization, and they're kind of pushing back on it. And I said, you haven't been a leader before. And when you're a leader, you're available all of the time. And that is a different responsibility. And for you not to be physically present, not from a fairness or even an equity standpoint, but people need you. And that's your role as a leader, is to be available. And so it's okay if you don't want to do that. But in order to have this role, more is going to be required of you. And it took her some time to sort through that. And then she ultimately decided that was the career path she wanted. And she arranged childcare and did the things she needed to do in order to come back full time so that she could get that promotion. And she did, and she's kicking ass. And it's really cool. And I think there's this also this other thing for 3 high achieving women. Not everybody wants to be in this seat. And that's okay. Right? So also old book, controversial in some ways, but it's about candor by Jack Welch. And he talks in the book's called Winning, and he talks about hiring and firing and sort of this number system, right? And so you want to invest a lot of time in your A's that are doing really, really well. And you want to get rid of your D's and F's quickly. It's like slow to hire, quick to fire. But there's this middle ground of the C and D, or excuse me, the B and C. And the C's you want to figure out, are they a B or are they a D and they're out the door? But B players are really freaking good. And you need a lot of B players on your team in order to function. You can't have all A players or it'd be kind of a hot mess. Right. So I think there's also this, going back to the unlearning and setting expectations from our conversation earlier, like I have to be okay with a B player that wants to come to work, do a killer job, deliver all that I ask them to do, and then be done at 5 and walk out the door. And as long as they're getting stuff done, I have to be okay with the fact that they don't want more. That was hard for me and probably similar to you because you're high achievers.
It was hard when we were so small as an organization too, because when you're really small and 2 of the 5 are us, right? It's like, well, why don't you want what we want? Like, why wouldn't everybody? We do.
Right.
Why don't you?
Right.
But I think we adjusted to that pretty quickly. And I think that's a piece of it too, right? Like to your point, you can't expect everything though.
Yeah.
So if you want one role, you can't expect the compensation of another role or to have a title of another role or to have that growth trajectory. But it is also okay to have one desire at one moment and then change your mind later and set yourself up for success and hear what it is that's going to be needed of you.
Right.
And so you could be interviewing at 2 different spots and like that's going to take a different response from the person in the interview, right? Like a different type of way that you approach it. But I think also people need to remember in an interview, you're selling yourself.
Right.
You know, and so phrase the question, I'm gonna kick ass in this way, but I need this flexibility and I promise I won't let you down.
Right. Yeah. And I think you made the point too, where we're talking about leaning in different times of our lives, right? And so this may be a time in your life where you're like, I can't lean in that hard. I've got really young kids and I'm going to stay in the workforce, which is also a lot of women just leave because it's too complicated. And we don't want to be an organization, and we aren't, but an organization that creates an environment where women can't have roles or, let's be honest, like dads. And I think there is some negative connotation about dads' participation, and I think it depends on the individual. But generationally, I think dads are now more involved than they have been in the past. And so we want to create environments where the fathers in our community can be out there, not getting pats on the back for being dads, but just being dads the same way we are moms all the time. And so you may say like, hey, at this point in my life, I'm not ready to commit to everything. But then when my kids are in 5th grade and they're starting to not want to hang out with me, I have more time and I'm ready to lean in and take that next role. So,
and that's a really good point, because I think we do lose a lot of women and we don't want to lose them. And because like, as I'm seeing, like, you know, my oldest, like she really doesn't want to hang out with me as much as I want to always hang out with her. And so I think that if there is the chance that you really want to stay in the workforce, like it is really nice to be able to have open and honest conversations to say, here's where I'm at now and here's where I want to be in the future. And like that might change.
Well, I'm a big proponent of everyone being independent too.
Right.
And if you take a gap for 5 years and maybe you didn't ever want to return, but something happened and you had to return, there's so much change that happens. So if you just keep a little foot in the door and you kind of know what's going on with AI and you kind of know these changes that are happening, you will be so much more successful when you're ready to jump all the way in.
But finding, to Sid's point, like finding a community or an employer that is going to be understanding of that and is going to set realistic expectations. It is a balance, but I do think it's a very individual like conversation, because you have to sort of earn the right to ask too. And I think that's probably what makes it tricky about an interview. It's like, I don't know you from Sam. And so am I going to give you all this flexibility that I may or may not give in my like regular employee world. And I think there's oftentimes I say to myself even like, is this the right time to ask? Have I earned the right to say that? Have I earned the right to make this request in my old life? And I think that that's what's harder about hearing in an interview is you don't have that like base level of understanding with someone either.
Totally.
So,
But I will tell you, if I don't know the person at all and they've come in and told me all the ways that they're going to kick butt and I need this thing, but I'm going to get back online at 6 p.m. and do X, Y, Z,
right.
I'm going to probably believe them because they're speaking so so much about these facts that they know.
Right.
I'm going to test it. I'm going to expect them to do that. But if you are really speaking on it and you really know what you need, that's going to come off well to me as someone who's interviewing someone. Maybe not to everybody, but I'll be like, okay, this person knows their shit. Like, I'm going to
They
are
bet prepared. They are ready.
Prepared.
They know exactly what they need in order to be successful. And I think that's huge. Rather than just being like, are you flexible?
Yeah, I don't really know. I'll do whatever you want. That to me, like if you're just gonna do whatever I say, I don't really want you.
That is actually a red flag for me. Yeah. They're like, oh, I'll do whatever you want. I was actually talking to an employee the other day about sort of some career movement. And they were like, well, I'll do whatever you want. And I'm like, well, these are two fundamentally different roles in two very different parts of the country. How do you just say, I'll do whatever you want? I'm like, I need you to have energy around this. Yeah. Back to that whole conversation about like, I will like help you along the path, but I'm not making the path for you. You have to do that. And so for me, a red flag is more like, I'm just here.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I need you to have some energy behind what it is you're excited about. So that's a tough one.
But we love Emma Grade.
Yeah.
How much do you guys value authenticity in an interview? Meaning, like, obviously everybody's in there to perform, but if someone comes in and says, like, hey, I need a little bit of work-life balance because of this, but I am a really hard worker versus someone who's like, I'm such a hard worker. Both of them you have to test, right? Because this person could be like, I'm such a hard worker, but then come in and expect a work-life balance, whereas someone in the interview would say, I'm coming up to you up front and saying, I need this, you know, this is an interview for me as much as it is for you, and seeing if it's a right fit. So I'm curious to know how much you, like, care about someone being honest in an interview versus like performing, I guess.
That's exactly what I meant though when I was saying like if someone has their shit together and tells me how they're going to do their things but knows what they need, I will believe them. You know, like because they know what they need to succeed, right?
I think the question, you know, Tiff's saying is like, okay, how if someone comes in and they're performative and perfect and give you all the right answers versus someone who might be a bit grittier and maybe a little bit more transparent. I don't even know that I would say honest, but like transparent about their needs. How do we receive that? Authenticity is my number one core value. And I show up the same way in this conversation that I will show up with at dinner with my friends, maybe with a little more tequila than right now, but like the vibe is generally the same, right? So I think when I want someone to show up, I don't want performance. I want to see a little bit of the cracks and see a little bit of like them being themselves because performance makes me uncomfortable. And so I think I would hope that people would be transparent, but I also have realized that's not always the case in interviews.
And what you think is transparent might not be also.
Yeah.
It's just hard to tell.
Yeah.
You know?
Which I think actually you're really good at this. Well, both of you are. I think the reason I have this job is because you trust people that you already know. And you typically hire people that have a connection. We don't do as many random hires. And I think that is unique because a lot of people go, unless it's like true like nepotism and they're just like hiring all of these people just for that reason. But you say, I know this skill set. I know the way that this person works. And I know that they're authentic and I know that I can teach the thing that they don't know. And I'm going to trust that rather than going through the performance of interviews. And it was actually something that came up recently with the analyst. And I had interviewed multiple people. One was a friend of our current analyst. I was debating between two. And then I actually thought about you guys and how you took the bet on me and was like, oh, this makes more sense. I've got someone like vouching for this person.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about whether they're being honest or whatever. I've got someone who's willing to put their name on it that works here that I trust. That's my gut. Like that's what I'm going with.
I was told to always go for someone you know first.
Yeah.
Because you have that testing point.
Right.
And not just that person, but you typically then know people around them too to know if that person is telling the truth or not.
Right.
Yeah, because it's so hard to sit through an interview and read a resume, and like it's hard to get a gut check, and we might all get different gut checks, right?
Yep.
So if we have a couple other touch points, it's so helpful.
Yep.
Like, because we can teach you anything,
Yeah.
you know, like teaching is easy.
Well, it's also very hard when we all have the same gut check and it's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that's true too.
And it happens.
And
Yeah.
100%. And Nick, who is an
Yes,
old person
yeah.
that Cathy and I used to work with,
I feel like he's the one that also told me to know the person.
yeah, and he was the one that was also like, if you're batting 50% on interviewing, you're doing
winning.
great. Like,
Yeah.
it is so
It's
hard
literally
to
a batting
tell.
score.
I mean, I
Yeah.
can't imagine dating right now. Jesus, I would fail at that. Like, everyone, I would be A, a hot mess, and B, like, how would I know if these people were good or bad or terrible? Or
You would just be single.
I would just be single
So
forever.
that's what I would just be single.
Tips like, yes, that's the way to go. Yes, I feel like that's what would happen. But that's what we do all day is decide, is this person worth the training, worth the money, worth the whatever? And then you spend all of this money on this person and you get 3 months in and you're like, shit,
Your
messed that one
time.
up. Yeah.
So much of your time, which we
Yeah.
just talked about how busy we are too. And then, but you're dedicating all of this special time to help this person. And then it just was wrong.
And then when it does, though, you're like, fuck yes, this,
Yeah,
excuse me,
and it's all
sorry.
worth it.
It works. And it's like, oh, this is great. I love that this worked out. And
Yeah.
it was great. Okay, let's talk leadership. My favorite subject outside of work-life harmony is understanding who we are as leaders. So I think there's kind of two things about this. There's a version where people are like, what's your leadership style? And you give off some information and say how you think you show up as a leader. And then there's the version that your employees say you are as a leader. And they're not always the same. So I'd be interested to hear how you would describe yourself from your perspective as a leader, and then be honest about what you think your employees would say about you as a leader.
Oh, this is a good one. I would say as a leader, they would say that I am inspiring and also a complete disaster.
That's what they would say, or you're saying that about yourself?
No, I would say my leadership style is just very authentic and transparent. And like, I just, whatever is in my brain just comes out of my mouth. Hence why we have very interesting conversations. But I think that people would say that I am inspiring and very mission driven, but that I'm also a disaster because like I'm not clear on things. I just like want people to read my mind and do things. And so, I think that would be the feedback. I mean, I'd be curious if that's what people say, but I think maybe you guys know.
We should find out.
But I think that's what people would say.
So I did my own thoughts on this ahead of time and I heard something and I think this describes me. I'm not a warm hug. But I do really care about
Yes.
my employees.
Yes.
And so I think I will stand up for them before I stand up for myself. I
Yeah.
will let people talk to me a certain way and I'm like, whatever, I don't really care. But you talk to one of my employees that way and I will correct you on the spot.
Yeah.
And I think that the employees, depending on if they're understanding what's going on, because I'm not a warm hug, if they're not getting it, then that can make them feel a certain way. And I get that, but I think sometimes the employee is not understanding that they're the ones not understanding and they're quick to blame somebody else.
Yeah.
So I can see that perspective. But I know for a fact because someone told me recently, like I stood up for them and they were very appreciative of that. So I think when they go through that process, then they know that it'll happen again.
Yeah.
And then I do like to try to teach. We've talked a little bit about me being impatient if it's not absorbed my way immediately. But for people who are ready for my teaching, I think they also really appreciate that. And they understand that I like to teach. But for people who aren't ready for it, then the third time around, they're seeing my frustration. And so they have a different feeling of me.
Yeah.
So I think that I would get a mixed response from the people that I manage.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I've been leading lots of people for a long time now. And I feel like my first version of leadership was a hot effing mess. Like I was trying to figure out who I was as a leader, trying to figure out like, am I authoritative? Am I who I am? Am I trying to be performative in this role? And I also think originally when I first started managing people, I was in my late 20s and I was managing men in their late 40s. And so it was like, also weird trying to figure out what role I played in there. So I would say my leadership style has evolved greatly. I think I'm at a point now where I am who I am and this is how I'm going to show up as a leader. I would like to project that I'm an empathetic leader and that I really try to balance that grace and accountability with people that work for me. I also understand both that they would say and I would say about myself that I'm highly neurotic about weird things like font and colors of Excel documents and like size of font and weird things that annoy me, and that I can be micromanagey about things that sometimes don't matter. And I had a recent conversation with an employee and I asked this individual, like, she was sending me things to review before they went out. And I said, okay, I love to edit. And so I edit things to be the way that I would want them to be presented. And I said, how does that make you feel when I do that? And she took a beat and I said, no, I really want your response. Like, I'm a person who really needs the feedback in order to adjust. And she said, sometimes I feel like I work really hard on something and then you edit it and it feels like a punch. It's like, oh, like she picked out all these things and then I feel shitty. And then sometimes though, I'll sit on it and be like, oh, she was probably right about like 80% of that. And I can get on board with that. But it's the 20% that doesn't really matter that would be helpful if you just didn't edit. And so I think that there's some of that like micromanagey part of me that happens. And I've been trying to pull back and say, okay, this isn't exactly how I would do it, but is it getting the job done? And leaning more into that role. I'm not great at it all the time. And then I would also say I get pretty micromanagey when I'm stressed. You do this too. And when you're stressed and you're thinking about things, you just start firing shit off to everyone. It's like, where are you on this? What's happening with this? We haven't talked about this for 7 months and I'm mid-thought, but I'm going to give you mid-thought to the end and I hope you figure it out at 5:30. And I'm like, fuck. So I like wake up
your answer.
Wake up in the morning and it's that. But at the beginning, it was harder for me. It was like, Jesus, I'm getting you mid-brain. And I didn't know what led up to that point. And so I'm only getting mid-thought through the end and I'm trying to figure out how to get that. But now I'm like, oh, she's stressed. Something's happening. I just need to get her as many of the answers as I can. And then I will figure out the why later. And that was hard for me, like in that role of working for someone and then also being a leader and being like, oh, should I do that sometimes? And then realizing it might have the same impact on them. And they might not be able to adjust as easily.
Yeah. I think I'm just always stressed because I'm just always doing that. But I do think I'm always stressed. So that's my personality.
Yeah, that
so
is true.
I'm just like that. So we all do it.
Yeah.
I just do it 100% of the time.
I think I tend to, maybe it's because we talk more, like have a tendency to know where your thought is coming from.
She's clear.
Yeah.
You're definitely
But
clear.
I think that is part of my downfall though, because in order to be clear, sometimes I have to do so much in order to be clear rather than saying like, I don't know, read this, go down, look up the folder yourself. Or instead I'm like, go to this folder, go to here, go to there. But I obviously I have not memorized our folder structure. So I have to actually do that. So there's like pluses and minuses. There's a balance there.
But then I guess then the question is, what is our role as the leader, right? Like what role do we play as like individual, like leaders to people and then leaders of an organization? And sometimes that's a bit different too. Mm-hmm. So like, what's your expectation of a leader or of yourself?
I think it's also interesting because we are all different leaders, right? We all are different leaders. And I think we all have different departments, but also together we are leaders of in totality. So I think that it's not bad that we have different backgrounds and different skill sets. But I think it takes different people to work with us and also that understanding where it's like showing up, knowing that whether you're a warm hug, an actual hug, you like to talk about your poop, whatever it is, like we care, right? And if you know that we care, like we always talk about like kind of linking arms and like pushing something through, like if you know we're there for you, then you can, to your point, learn that when I'm screaming on an email in the middle of the night because I wake up thinking about it or I'm still thinking about it and I'm stressed, like you can say, okay, like it's okay. She really cares. Like she doesn't mean this. And so I think part of it is having that culture and having that trust between us and our employees to know that we're not always going to show up as perfect leaders. Right? Like we can always have bad days, but that we are there for each other.
Yeah. I think the foundation is the key to it though, right? It's like back to the conversation about how you hire people that you know, because that helps build the foundation a lot faster. And so when you are at a point where you're hearing something, if someone's frustrated, or when I'm frustrated with someone on my team, it's like, I've built up enough trust, and this isn't about you in this moment. This is me trying to figure this out and solve this problem. And then I will like repair the relationship later. But right now I need to solve the problem. And I would argue I don't do that too often, but I'm probably doing it actually just as often. It's just showing up as little micromanagey little ticks rather than a more like screaming email about whatever, right? Like yours is more, it's a louder, more obvious thing. And mine's probably driving them crazy with like a slow, tiny death, which now I'm reflecting on.
I also think just having honest reviews with your employees, and they should be scheduled and they should be unscheduled, right? Every 6 months, but every once in a while, just have one.
Yeah.
I'm not saying harp on a bad thing, but I'm saying just have an honest review with them, and then they can understand and allow them to give you that feedback too, and for you to be able to explain why you act in a certain way. Like I told you guys that I've been trying not to micromanage people. So one of the leadership skills that I've been told to practice is to answer a question with a question rather than just giving the answer. But then somebody asked me, or told me it's very frustrating, and I wish you would just give me the answer, and I explained why. And I think that can help a lot with that trust and that foundation to understand where we're coming from.
Right.
Too.
The why behind your behavior.
And we had that like session where we were doing that like quarterly meeting, and someone came and they were like, you should never just look at an employee and be like, why? And everyone looked at me and they're like, Sid does that all the time. Right. But then we actually engaged in a discussion about it. And it's like, I'm not doing that because I'm mad. I'm not doing it because I want to, be mean. I'm doing it because I want you to tell me all the things so I can help you fix whatever is broken and help you get to a solution. And I think like having those open and honest conversations allow people to have to see both sides of it, right?
I also think you use the whys. I don't want to call it a test because I don't think it's purposeful in the test, but like prove to me that the decision that you made is the one that you should have made and that you really fundamentally understand what you're telling me.
Yeah.
And if you can explain it to me, then I know that that was the right answer.
Yeah.
It's like Excel. I was actually having one of the analysts come help with something, and I was like, can you do this on Excel? He's like, yeah. And he started to sit down. I said, no, teach me how to do this. This is one small thing I think I need to figure out. But it took him 5 minutes to explain it because he was like, shit, I don't know how to explain it. I can just do it.
Yeah.
And he like figured out how to teach me how to do it. And it was like a very different process. And I think oftentimes that's what you're asking with why is like, tell me that you really know what you're doing.
Right. Which is why I end up asking a lot of questions, why I'm very direct, all of those things, because I want to know that I want to understand your thought process. Right. And I should probably be a little bit nicer about it, but that's really what I'm looking for.
But also for the first 7 years, we had a very small team. So Sid and I wore a lot of hats, and we had seconds to figure things out.
Right.
And one of the things that we are all is decisive as leaders.
Yeah.
And you have to then be direct. You don't have time to be like, oh, well, how does this make you feel? How does that? Because you need to solve these things because the business needs to survive.
Right.
Because I think you'd rather me ask why than us go out of business and you not have a job. And I think sometimes people need that perspective too.
Yeah. It's also interesting because like I personally have had zero leadership training other than like some of the stuff we've been doing over the last couple of years, mainly because Meredith's like, you guys need to get it together. But we really haven't had any formal training, and it's been interesting to see the difference between like you are a much more polished leader, and like I'm just a very much like go with like the wind, however it's happening. And it's been interesting to see that difference in all of us and how we are leaders. And we just like didn't have time. We didn't have time to really focus on it.
Well, and how we communicated with each other is
enough.
very unique. And then it didn't apply to anyone else.
Yeah.
Like quite frankly, like maybe a little bit my sister, but that's unfair because she's lived with me for 43 years.
Yeah. Cathy and I basically just like don't talk. It's just like ESP.
Yeah,
and then
a couple
like,
words.
Yeah, it's a couple words.
And that is hard. And we talked about this too. It is hard. Like I've been trying to separate you two, right? So there's this whole like Sid and Cathy. And it's like, no, Sid is a human that is separate from Cathy. And that is important for employees to understand. And because you are different people. Yes, you have some similarities, but you actually are very different in how you approach things. And there's a lot in terms of like your decisiveness and you move quickly. But I would argue as a third party in this leadership group, like you are very different in how you communicate and how you show up and what things what bothers you, what doesn't bother you, how quickly you want to move on from things. And so working into that, like separating that ESP a bit because you did have to have it for survival for so long. And now you don't have as much overlap. You both have huge roles in the organization that don't require you to be talking 17 times a day, right? Because you have 4,000 things to do on your own, and then there's some crossover. And figuring out, like, again, I think it was Josh, we talked about the parenting thing, right? Like, as leaders, we have to be a united front, just like the parenting united front. And so even if we're doing it a bit differently, we're going to challenge each other in these environments, like when we're having a business meeting, the three of us, and say, I'm not sure that's the route I want to go. But when we're in meetings with each other, we're challenging each other on the like work product, but we're not challenging each other on like leadership and vision about what we're doing. Right?
Well, I think that's a lot of also when it was just a smaller group and me and Sid were doing so much. Sid and I don't really publicly challenge each other.
Yeah.
We can say a few words to each other that's like, no, take me seriously. And we all have bad days. We talk like that happens every once in a while. But it's not even like, I don't think it's purposeful. We're just like, oh, I see where you're going and this isn't the spot. This isn't the time for me to push back on this. There are times because you want people to understand, or there is a time to still challenge each other. Yeah. But we did a lot of that, just us two.
Right.
Which I think made people think Sid and Cathy even more as one.
Right.
Which is interesting because people will tell Sid something and then they'll call me next, which one, I'm like, well, you just called her. Why are you just call her again?
Right.
But then they'll want me to know what they told her in a private conversation with just them. This also happens with working with your sister. It's like people do the same thing.
That is very
and
true.
I'm like, I wasn't there. Right. I can't know things that I literally wasn't there for.
The difference but I think people, it's like, just like a child, like they're looking for a different perspective and they're sort of working out their own issue with a different receiver. It's like Blair being like, I just want you to listen. And sometimes people just want to be heard. And I do think this happened when we're talking about like the role of the leader too. This listening thing is tricky. I have historically been oddly a pretty good listener to employees, but to the point where I end up becoming their therapist. And I'm like, oh shit, this is too much. You need professional help. Like I can't solve this problem. But I'm trying to be there to like see them as the whole human and realize like how they're showing up and all of that. But then I get to the point where now I'm like solving all of your shit. Like, why do you function this way? I can't fix that. And I'm trying to pull out of that a bit more. And you guys also know I have pretty like hard boundaries about like personal engagement.
You have the strongest ones.
Right.
Yeah, but yet you're the therapist. That's why I'm not a warm hug. I'm just kind of like, skirt around back to work.
Right. But I don't like socialize with anyone. I don't social media with anyone other like than the two of you. But I don't.
Not even me.
That is actually true. We haven't.
You just you told me it was okay.
Yes, exactly. But you haven't asked. But I think that there are different boundaries that I have around that. But maybe it's because I do show up in that way where people give me a lot of information and I'm just not sure I need to like have a mutual sharing there, which is tricky sometimes.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting because as time has gone on for you, because now you're like 2 years in, like I think you are a little less like that. Like when you started, I think you're very right, but now you have shit to do, so you're
less like friendly.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, Tiff would probably say that too because she's like talking about how direct I am sometimes, but that is true. I have more to do now than I did then. I also joke with Cathy like, I was in sales for 20 years. And so my whole job was making everyone feel good all the time.
So they
could do their thing and also making my clients feel good and taking the time to say, how are you? And now I just write emails with no introductions. I don't sign my name, which I used to lose my shit on my team. I'm like, your auto signature is not a signature. Right. You write your name. Like that is a sign off. That's a box at the bottom with information. That's not your name. And now I just am like, where are you on this? ? Send. And like, that's it. And I've lost all sense of decorum. Thank you. Thanks to the two of you.
Soon you'll add 800 question marks.
I will never do that. I know it's like, I love you, but it is still on my trigger list. I'm like, oh my God, why are there so many question marks when you write things? So many.
I really want to know.
Depending on the generation, they have very different expectations about what a leader is. And I'm going to make us old for a second, but the younger generation is a bit more, help me take every step, guide me, be my mentor, be my therapist, be my mom, be all of these things to me, but also don't make me come to work all of the time and like live in this environment. And sorry, Ari, the intern who's sitting over here, probably rolling her eyes at me. But I think
Do you think we're uptight?
but I think that is like, and you're playing different roles and you're going to show up into a different environment. And so how do we show up as that version of that leader too and stay authentic to ourselves? I think there's a lot we're going to learn in the next 12 months.
Okay, well, this has been a super fun first episode. And to bring it to a close, we're going to wrap up with a quote. And my quote that I was thinking about is something that I often say, but I'll give Nike a little credit because they came up with just do it technically. But the quote that I want to use is just effing do it. We can't say bad words here. So, and I think that it applies to so many things. It applies to work. It applies to life. If you have something, don't procrastinate, just do it. If you want to have a baby, you'll figure it out. Just do it. Just do all of the things and know, especially as women, that you can and that there are people that will support you. I think we've talked about today both work-life harmony, as Meredith likes to call it. And part of that is just knowing and believing that you can do all of the things, whether you're doing them all great or not so great. The point is that you're doing them and you're living them and you're getting those experiences. So I think that's the quote. Any additional thoughts on that?
I love it.
Yeah, I love it. Just get
I
it
think
done.
the key right there is like, it's doing, it's not perfecting. You're not trying to be perfect at all the things. You're not having it all in an A+ way across the board. It's just doing, knowing in yourself that what's important to you, you're saying yes to, and you're moving those things forward.
It's not thinking about doing. It's not planning to do. It's not wanting to do. Just do. Don't do all that. I mean, plan a little bit, but just get it done.
Yeah. And know that it's okay that it's hard.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard.
It will be hard.
And it's going to also be great. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.